All right, get those thinking caps on, because today we're diving into a world of whiskers. Mouse whiskers, to be exact.
You might be thinking, okay, but what does that have to do with me? It's a good question. But the research we're looking at, where top-down meets bottom-up, cell-type-specific connectivity map of the whisker system, actually tells us a lot about how our own brains deal with all the information coming in from our senses.
So this isn't just about mice and their amazing facial hair, then?
Not at all. Imagine you're trying to find your way around a dark room. You're using your senses, right? Your hands, your feet, even your ears are sending information to your brain to help you understand the space.
I can see where you're going with this. Mice use their whiskers in a similar way.
Exactly. For a mouse, their whiskers are like a superpower. They're packed with sensitive nerve endings, and the mouse can move them around to map out its surroundings in incredible detail.
That's pretty cool. But we already knew a bit about how whiskers work, right? What's so groundbreaking about this new research?
You're right. It's not like we're starting from scratch. For a long time, we thought of the whisker system as pretty straightforward. Whiskers brush against something, the signal goes up to the brain, and boom, the mouse knows what it touched. Simple bottom-up processing, like a relay race from whisker to brain.
A relay race. Okay, I got it. But I have a feeling it's not that simple.
You know it. What this research shows is that this pathway is way more dynamic and complex than we thought. It's not just signals going up to the brain. The brain is also shaping and filtering those signals before they even reach higher processing centers.
Hold on, so the brain is filtering information before it's even fully processed. That's wild. We have to talk more about this. So the brain is like, hold on, I don't need all this junk. Let me just focus on the important stuff.
Yeah, exactly. This paper really shows just how important inhibition is. And it's not just up in the higher brain regions, it's all the way down in the brainstem.
Wow, so even before the brain can really figure out what the whiskers are feeling, it's already deciding what's important to pay attention to.
That's the idea. It's like the brain is getting bombarded with information, and it needs a way to quickly filter out the irrelevant stuff so it can focus.
I guess that makes sense, but what would the brain even think is irrelevant when we're talking about whisker information?
That's a great question. It probably depends a lot on what the mouse is doing.
Yeah.
Like if it's looking for food, maybe the brain prioritizes things about texture or shape and ignores stuff like wind or movement.
So it's like, it's not just what we sense, it's what our brains choose to ignore. And that's happening all the time, even at these really early stages. Fascinating. But you said there was more to this. It's not just a one-way street, right?
You got it. The brain isn't just getting information, it's sending signals back down, changing the information in real time, like a feedback loop.
Wait, so you're saying that the whiskers send a signal to the brain, but then the brain sends something back to actually change how the whiskers are sensing?
Yeah. Think about it like, when you adjust your grip on a coffee cup. Your brain is always checking things like pressure and weight to make sure you don't drop it.
So the mouse's brain is doing the same thing, just with whiskers.
And we can't forget about the thalamus. That's a big part of all of this. For a long time, people thought it was just a simple relay station, just passing information on to the cortex. But this research shows that the thalamus is way more than that.
It's like the brain's quality control department or something.
I like that.
Yeah.
And this is where those top-down signals we talked about earlier come in. The cortex, the main part of the brain, can actually send signals back to the thalamus and be like, hey, pay attention to this or ignore that.
Wow, so they're talking back and forth, the cortex and the thalamus, all just to figure out what those whiskers are feeling. Incredible.
That's the coolest part. The researchers were able to map these pathways in amazing detail. They used this technique called anterograde tracing.
Anterograde tracing, what is that?
Well, they basically inject this fluorescent dye that lights up the path a signal takes so they can actually see how different parts of the brain are talking to each other.
That's really clever. So what did this detailed mapping tell them about the whisker system?
Well, one thing they found is that the thalamus isn't just getting info from the whiskers and the cortex, it's also sending signals to other parts of the brain.
Other parts, like what?
Like areas involved in things like movement, memory, even emotion.
You're kidding. So a mouse moving its whiskers around is connected to all these other complex brain functions.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And get this, they even found this whole new communication pathway within the thalamus.
A whole new pathway. So they had no idea it was even there before.
Nope. Which just goes to show how much we still don't know about how this brain region works.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. But how does the brain actually handle all this? I mean, this is some next-level coordination going on here. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. But how does the brain actually handle all this? I mean, this is some next-level coordination going on here.
You're right. It's like a perfectly choreographed dance. And the things doing the choreographing are neuromodulators.
Neuromodulators, we talked about those before, but what was their role again?
Think of them like messengers that help different parts of the brain talk to each other better.
The brain's own internal messaging system.
Exactly. And they have a big impact on how the brain processes information. Like, they can actually change what the thalamus focuses on in those whisker signals. Things like texture or movement or location.
Oh, I see. So depending on the neuromodulators, the thalamus might pay attention to different things.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're fine-tuning the whole system depending on what the mouse needs to focus on at that moment.
That makes sense. But it also sounds incredibly complex.
It is complex, and honestly, there's still a lot we don't know about it. Even with all these findings, the researchers are saying that we're just starting to understand how much neuromodulators really do.
Well, it's pretty amazing to think that something as simple as a mouse whisker is connected to this whole intricate web of brain activity. But for those of us who aren't walking around whisking things, why does all this matter?
Well, that's the cool thing about this type of research. Even though it seems like we're just looking at mouse whiskers, what we're really learning about is how brains work in general, including our own.
Okay, so what's the big picture here? What could this research actually lead to?
Well, for one, it could totally change how we think about sensory processing disorders. Things like autism, ADHD, even anxiety can involve differences in how the brain filters and understands sensory information.
So by understanding these processes in a mouse, it could help us diagnose and treat these conditions in humans.
Right. Imagine being able to see exactly which neural pathways are messed up in a specific disorder. Then you could develop really targeted therapies.
That would be amazing. What else? What other possibilities does this open up?
Well, think about AI, artificial intelligence, or those brain-computer interfaces that people are working on. If we want to build machines that can interact with the world like we do, we need to understand how the brain processes sensory information at this level.
So this isn't just about mice and their whiskers. It's about understanding the brain, maybe even changing the world.
Exactly. And the best part is, we're only just scratching the surface. There's still so much more to discover.
That's what I love about these deep dives. It really makes you appreciate the incredible things our brains are doing every second, even if we don't realize it. So next time you see a mouse, maybe take a second to think about those whiskers. They're not just for show, they're a window into one of the most amazing and complex things in nature, the brain. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep those brains buzzing.